I didn't grow up thinking the world was dangerous. Not really. My mom kept our doors locked, sure, and she always told me to trust my instincts. But we lived in a small town in Vermont, the kind of place where people waved from their porches, where kids still rode bikes down the middle of the street. You grow up in a town like Maple Glen and you start thinking bad things happen somewhere else. Cities, maybe. Not here. I was 16 that fall, just starting my junior year after we moved from Portland. My mom got a teaching job at the community college, and I was doing my best to blend in. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't invisible either, somewhere in the middle. That's probably why Dylan Barrett noticed me. We sat next to each other in history. He was quiet, polite, always wore flannel even when it was warm out. There was something old-fashioned about him, like he didn't quite fit into 2019, but he was nice. We talked about movies, mostly old horror flicks from the 70s and 80s. I mentioned I liked The Thing, and his eyes lit up like someone had finally said the right password. We didn't hang out much outside of school, but one Wednesday, he turned to me after class and said, "Hey, I'm doing a horror marathon this weekend. You want to come by?" My dad usually lets me take over the living room when he's home. I hesitated. I didn't know him that well, and I wasn't sure how my mom would feel about me sleeping over at a kid's house she'd never met. But he seemed genuine, and I hadn't made many friends yet, so I told him, yeah, maybe. He scribbled his address on a torn sheet of notebook paper. 292 Ashton Ridge Lane. I showed it to my mom that night and she frowned. "Isn't there a storm warning for Saturday?" "That's out past the edge of town," she said. I shrugged. "I'll be fine. I'll text you if it gets bad." She wasn't thrilled, but I promised to check in, and I think she was just happy I was finally making friends. Saturday came, and she dropped me off just before dusk. The road twisted for what felt like miles until we finally pulled up to a weathered two-story cabin tucked between pine trees. It wasn't scary exactly, just isolated. No other houses nearby, no streetlights, just woods and quiet. Dylan came out to greet me. He wore a faded hoodie and jeans, his sleeves pushed up even though the air had a bite to it. "Hey," he said. "Glad you could make it." His dad opened the front door behind him. Tall, thin, gray beard. Something about him made me uneasy. Maybe the way he said my name twice in a row, slowly, like he was trying it out. "Liam, Liam." Then he nodded once and walked back inside. "Sorry," Dylan said quietly as we stepped inside. "He's kind of off lately." The cabin smelled like cedar and damp laundry. There was a faint trace of mildew in the air, but nothing unbearable. Dylan had a stack of DVDs on the coffee table. The Exorcist, Poltergeist, The Shining, all the classics. He'd set out microwave popcorn, candy, sodas, and a half-played board game on the floor. "No one else coming?" I asked, dropping my overnight bag by the wall. He shook his head. Sounded sketchy. "Nah, I invited a couple guys from school, but they flaked," said the storm. "Yeah, my mom wasn't wild about it either." "It won't be bad," he said, like he'd checked the weather himself. "We'll be fine." The evening started out normal. We watched The Thing first, and Dylan knew every line. By the time the second movie rolled around, the wind had picked up. Rain slapped the windows in gusts. At around 8:30, Dylan's dad came downstairs, didn't say anything, just walked to the kitchen, poured himself something in a mug and muttered, "Going up." He climbed the stairs without turning on a single light. After that, it was just us. The power blinked the first time during Poltergeist, just a quick flicker that made the light stutter and the TV screen go black for half a second before everything came back. I looked over at Dylan. "Does that happen a lot out here?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the window. "Sometimes," he finally said, "especially during storms." Outside, the trees were swaying hard. Every gust of wind sent shadows writhing across the porch. The rain had shifted from a steady tap to a constant drumbeat. We kept watching the movie, but my attention drifted. Dylan kept glancing at the front window like he was waiting for something. or someone. I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend the tension in my stomach was just the storm. But then lightning struck, and for a split second, the whole yard lit up, and I saw it. A figure, just standing at the edge of the trees. It was too quick to make out details. No face, no clothes, just a shape, black against the silver flash of light, and then gone as darkness snapped back in place. "Did you see that?" I asked, already getting to my feet. Dylan didn't flinch. "See what?" There was someone out there, standing by the trees. He didn't look away from the window. Probably nothing. That answer didn't sit right with me. My brain was already running worst-case scenarios, escaped convicts, drifters, some messed-up prank. I walked to the window, careful not to get too close. I peered out but saw nothing now. Just wind and rain and darkness. We sat in silence for a while after that. I didn't want to start another movie. I didn't want to say what I was really thinking, which was, I wanted to go home. But it was past 10 now, and the storm outside had gotten worse. There was no way my mom could get here in this mess, and I wasn't about to try walking back to town on foot. So I stayed. The power went out for good around 10:40. One moment the room was dimly lit by the warm glow of the screen, and the next, we were swallowed by darkness. "Damn it," Dylan muttered. He lit 2 candles from a box near the fireplace, placing one on the coffee table and the other on the windowsill. "You have any flashlights?" "In the kitchen drawer. Want one?" I nodded. He got up and disappeared down the hall. I sat alone, candlelight flickering. The wood creaked above me. Old house noises, I told myself. But it felt off, like someone was walking slowly upstairs. A shuffle, a pause, another creak. Then Dylan came back with a small flashlight and handed it to me. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. It's creepy with the lights out." He gave a faint smile. "Guess it's a good thing we like horror." But this wasn't like watching a movie anymore. This was something else, something real. At 12:30, the knock came. It was soft at first, barely more than a tap. We both froze. Another knock, louder this time. Then a pause, and then bang, bang, bang. I whispered, "Who the hell would be out in this weather?" Dylan looked at me, expression unreadable. "Don't open it." But just don't. The knocking didn't stop. It got faster, more frantic. Then it slowed again, almost rhythmic, like someone was toying with us. I moved toward the door anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I saw who it was, it would stop being scary. Maybe it would be his dad coming back down, or some hiker who got lost and saw the light from the window. I leaned toward the peephole. No one. I stepped back. And that's when I saw it. A blur, a shadow darting across the side window. Fast, too fast. Like someone had been crouched there waiting and bolted the second they knew I was watching. I turned toward Dylan, my voice shaking. "Dylan, this isn't funny." He didn't move. "That's not my dad," he said, barely above a whisper. "But he's upstairs." "No." He looked pale. "He's not." I took the stairs 2 at a time. My brain couldn't make sense of what I was hearing. If his dad wasn't up there, then who had I seen earlier? Who did I hear walking? The hallway upstairs was cold. Unnaturally cold, like a window had been left open. I reached the top and noticed the door to the master bedroom cracked open. I pushed it slowly with my foot. No one inside. The bed was untouched. No signs of anyone sleeping there. No clothes on the chair. Just emptiness. And that smell again, like wet leaves and something else. Something metallic. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw them. Footprints, wet, muddy ones, leading from the bedroom window down the hall. I followed them slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. They didn't stop at the stairs. They continued down, back to the first floor. I bolted. When I reached the living room, Dylan was gone. The candle on the coffee table had been knocked over, still burning, but lying sideways on the wood. I grabbed my phone and ducked into the bathroom, locked the door, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The signal was weak, but I got through. The operator's voice was calm. She asked my name, my address, told me to stay quiet. "There's someone in the house," I whispered. "I don't know who. I don't even know if..." And then I heard footsteps just outside the door. Slow, deliberate. They paused. The doorknob jiggled once, then stopped. Silence. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop from making a sound. The operator kept asking if I was safe. I wasn't, but I told her I'd stay on the line until help came. The footsteps eventually moved away. I stayed in that bathroom for nearly 3 hours until I heard the knock again. This time, it was the police. They arrived at 4:15 a.m. The front door was wide open. Wet footprints trailed across the floor, leading in different directions like more than one person had been inside. But Dylan? Gone. So was his dad. And nothing about the cabin added up. The cops asked the usual questions. What happened? Who was there? When I'd last seen Dylan and his dad. I told them everything. About the storm, the knocking, the man in the trees, the footprints, the empty room. They exchanged looks. Not disbelief exactly, but the kind that said they were already filing this away under teen panic. One of the officers, a younger guy, maybe mid-20s, knelt next to where the candle had burned a black mark into the coffee table. "You say Dylan Barrett lived here?" I nodded. "Yeah, that's what he told me. Gave me the address at school." He looked around slowly. "Son, this house hasn't been lived in for months." My stomach dropped. That's not possible. His dad was here when I arrived. I talked to him. He stood up. "There's no furniture upstairs. The fridge isn't plugged in. There's dust on the dishes. No sign of mail or recent utilities. Whoever was here, it wasn't the Barretts." I told him he was wrong. I'd seen Dylan. I knew him. The older officer pulled me aside. "Listen, we've had calls about this place before. Break-ins, teens squatting. Last family to live here moved out in April after something happened to their son. That word, something, hung in the air like a loaded gun." "What happened to him?" I asked. "Went missing. Name was Dylan Barrett." It didn't compute at first. I kept shaking my head like I hadn't heard him right. "No, that's who I was with." He pulled out a phone, scrolled through something, then showed me a photo. It was Dylan. Same shaggy brown hair. Same tired eyes. Same half smile I'd seen across from me in history class. "That's him," I said. "That's the kid. I just spent the night with him." The officer exhaled slowly. "He's been missing for 6 months. His parents moved out weeks after the search ended. They found blood in the woods near the tree line, but never recovered a body." I didn't know what to say. Nothing made sense. It felt like I'd been dropped into someone else's life, someone else's memory. "Maybe he came back?" I offered, weakly. "Maybe he was hiding out and..." But even as I said it, I knew it was wrong. Whoever, or whatever, had been in that house with me. It wasn't Dylan Barrett, not the way I'd known him, and it sure as hell wasn't his father. They let me call my mom. She drove out fast, hugged me like she thought I might disappear too. She didn't ask a lot of questions, just kept her hand on my back the whole way home. That night I didn't sleep, not really. I kept seeing that silhouette in the lightning, hearing the knock, wondering why Dylan told me not to open the door, if he knew what was waiting out there, or worse, if he knew what was already inside. Over the next few weeks, I barely talked to anyone. At school, I kept looking for Dylan in the halls out of habit. I even went back to our history class once, stood outside the door just to see if I'd made it all up. But his seat stayed empty. No one else ever mentioned him again. I found the scrap of paper he gave me, the one with the address. I checked the handwriting over and over, hoping I'd see a difference, a flaw. But it was his. I know it was his. I started digging. Public records, old newspapers, Reddit threads about local disappearances. That house, 292 Ashton Ridge, Had a history. Not the haunted kind. Nothing supernatural. Just wrong. Years before the Barretts, a man died of exposure in the woods nearby. Before that, there was a break-in that turned violent. A girl went missing from a bus stop less than a mile away in 2003. Nobody ever proved anything tied it all together, but locals had stopped buying up property near the ridge. The realtors even started calling it bad land. It wasn't cursed, not like in movies, but bad things clung to it, like rot under paint. What really got me, though, was a photo I found online, grainy, posted by a ghost hunting group that had once investigated the property. The image showed the same front porch, the same crooked rocking chair, the same tree line. And standing in the corner, half-shadowed, was a boy who looked just like Dylan. But the timestamp was from 2 years before I moved to town. I stopped searching after that. There wasn't going to be a clean answer. There never is with stuff like this. People like certainty, but the truth is, some doors don't close. Some stories never end. They just wait for the next person to walk into them. I still have the overnight bag I brought to the cabin. Haven't unpacked it. Sometimes I think about throwing it away. Sometimes I think I should burn it. But most nights, I just leave it in the corner of my closet, zipper half open, waiting. Just like the house did. And here's the part I think about the most. Dylan warned me. "Don't open the door," he said. He looked scared. Not just scared of what was outside, but scared for me. And I think maybe part of him was still in there, trapped, watching, trying to stop whatever happened to him from happening to me. He couldn't stop it from happening to himself. But he tried. Not all danger wears a mask. Sometimes it looks like a friend, a quiet house, a harmless night in the woods. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And the most terrifying monsters aren't always ghosts or killers. Sometimes they're the spaces we ignore, the warnings we shrug off, the doors we open without asking who's behind them. I've never liked birthday parties, not even when I was a kid. Something about being surrounded by other people's families always made me feel like a guest in someone else's life. But when you're 10, and you're already the kid who reads too much and talks too little, turning down a party invitation doesn't do you any favors socially. So when Hunter Jameson invited me to his sleepover birthday party in July of 2012, I said yes. Not because we were friends, we weren't, but because everyone else in our 5th grade class was going. Hunter was one of those kids who didn't make sense. He was loud but not likable, always smelled faintly like gasoline or old gym socks, and wore the same stained hoodie like it was armor. But people gravitated toward him, maybe because he didn't care what anyone thought, maybe because he said things the rest of us wouldn't dare say out loud. He had this reckless energy like he'd already lived through more than we ever would. When I told my mom the address, 1345 Wilkins Street, she paused mid-chop at the kitchen counter. "That's down by the tracks, isn't it?" "I guess." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll walk you up to the door." But when we got there, she stayed in the car. Hunter's mom was waiting on the porch in a stretched tank top and cut-off jeans, a cigarette dangling from her lip like she was on break from something she didn't want to return to. She waved my mom off like I was being dropped at a Greyhound station. Inside, the house was chaos. Loud music blared from a battered stereo. The floor was sticky. There were dog toys and shredded magazines all over the carpet. Someone had drawn on the living room wall in red Sharpie. A tail, an actual raccoon tail, hung from the ceiling fan like a prize. 2 giant dogs barked at everything, and I swear one of them growled every time I made eye contact. 5 other boys were there, most of whom I knew from school. We squeezed into Hunter's room, a small, sour-smelling space lit by a lava lamp and a flickering desk light. There was one mattress on the floor and a pile of old action figures in the corner. No one brought sleeping bags. No one thought we'd need them. The only rule? Don't go into Craig's room, Hunter's half-brother. Just don't bug him. "He's cool," Hunter said. But I remember laughing at the time, like the whole thing was some weird adventure. I didn't know that by the end of the night I'd be walking barefoot in the dark, terrified I wouldn't make it home at all. The first couple of hours were manageable. We had greasy pepperoni pizza from a box that looked like it had been reheated 3 times. Hunter passed around knockoff soda and a half-eaten birthday cake with a melted plastic dinosaur on top. We watched some horror movie none of us understood and told stupid ghost stories. Everyone pretended not to care that no parents had checked on us. Around 9:15, everything shifted. It started with shouting from the backyard. Then yelling turned to screaming. Something about car keys. A crash. Then a man's voice, deep, slurred, and furious, roared through the paper-thin walls. Hunter's dad. We hadn't even known he was home. "I swear to God, someone's gonna get hurt tonight," he shouted. Then something shattered. Glass, I think. One of the dogs barked like it wanted to rip someone apart. A woman yelled something back, and another crash followed. We all just sat there, pretending it wasn't happening. No one spoke. One of the boys started fiddling with his shoelaces like if he just focused on them hard enough, it would make everything stop. Hunter tried to keep it cool. "He does this every time," he muttered. But his hands wouldn't stop moving, fidgeting, twitching, picking at the threads in his hoodie sleeve. At 10:05, we heard a crash from the kitchen. Then a scream. A real one. High-pitched. Like pain. The bedroom door flew open. It was Craig. He stood there in a wife-beater and sagging jeans, thin but tense like a coiled wire. His eyes were wide and glassy, and he didn't blink enough. "Who touched my drawer?" he said. No one answered. He stepped inside and looked at each of us like he already knew we were guilty. Then he smiled, tight, with no warmth. He tossed something onto the carpet. It bounced once, a bullet. "I've got 6 more, he said. "Sleep tight." And then he walked out. We didn't sleep after that. I wanted to go home. Right then. But it was like my body didn't believe it had permission to move. My mouth went dry. My hands felt numb. Hunter just sat there staring at the wall like he wasn't in the room anymore. "I want to call my mom," I said finally. Hunter blinked, like I'd pulled him out of a dream. "Phones don't really work here." I grabbed my backpack. It wasn't where I left it. "Where's my bag?" I asked. Hunter shrugged. "Probably downstairs, I don't know." The others didn't say anything. Not Liam, not Ben, not the kid with the braces whose name I forgot. They just looked at each other, like we were all waiting for someone else to make the first move. At 11:30, one of the older teens from the backyard stumbled into the room and unzipped his jeans. "Bathroom's occupied," he slurred. Then he grabbed an empty bottle from the floor and peed in it. That was it. That was the final straw. I turned to Liam, the only kid who looked as terrified as I felt. "We're leaving." He nodded without a word. We crept out the side door, avoiding the broken glass in the kitchen, stepping over beer cans and cigarette butts. The backyard reeked of vomit and dog piss. A bug zapper flickered above us, throwing blue light across the overgrown grass. No jackets, no flashlights, no plan. We just ran. We made it 3 blocks before we saw lights, a gas station. It felt like a miracle. The clerk was in his 20s, leaning over a magazine, and barely looked up when we walked in. We must have looked like ghosts, barefoot, trembling, covered in mosquito bites and dirt. "You kids all right?" he asked. I tried to answer, but my voice cracked. He handed me the phone without another word. My mom answered on the second ring. I didn't even try to explain. I just told her where we were and asked if she could come. I didn't cry, but I was close. She showed up 20 minutes later in her slippers, said nothing, just hugged me like I'd come back from war. Liam's house was on the way, so we dropped him off first. His parents weren't home. He didn't say anything as he got out, just looked at me and nodded once. Like we'd shared something no one else could ever really understand. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the bullet on the floor, about the way Craig looked at us. about what could have happened if we hadn't left. Hunter didn't show up to school the next week, then another. There were rumors that someone called CPS, that Craig had gotten arrested, that the cops came to the house and found something in the backyard. No one really knew the truth. I never asked. Hunter showed up once, months later, at a school carnival. His hoodie was cleaner. His hair was shorter, but his eyes looked older, like he'd seen more than a fifth grader should have. We didn't talk. We just passed each other, and he nodded once. After that night, I never went to another sleepover unless my mom had personally met the parents, toured the house, and stayed 10 extra minutes awkwardly asking too many questions. I didn't care if I looked like a baby. I didn't care if the other kids thought I was weird, because I knew something they didn't. Not every party ends with cake and balloons. Sometimes it ends with a bullet on the floor. Never ignore your instincts, even if everyone else does. Just because a place looks like home doesn't mean it's safe. And just because someone calls something a birthday doesn't make it a celebration. You don't owe anyone your silence, your trust, or your presence, especially when your gut is telling you to leave. I never imagined that I'd agree to sleep in a giant, half-cold, half-unfinished house in rural Pennsylvania. But then again, I never thought I'd learn something about fear that summer night in March of 2021. I agreed because Max Holloway was my friend, even if he barely had any, and because no one else answered his messages. He'd just moved into his parents' country fixer-upper at 1019 Finch Hollow Road, and they were out of town for the weekend closing on their sale of another house. He didn't want to stay there alone the first night, so he asked me to stay, said I'd be doing him a favor. I liked being needed, so I said yes. His parents had left basic furniture scattered in dusty rooms, couches, chairs, a kitchen table, but no Wi-Fi and barely any lights. Max shrugged and said, "We'll camp in the living room." He tossed his sleeping bag onto the hardwood floor and set out a bag of chips, cereal bars, and 2 flashlights. That should have been my first warning sign. The place smelled like drywall dust and damp wood, like someone had just ripped up old carpet and left the walls half-painted. Dust sheets covered half the windows upstairs. One of the kitchen's back doors didn't latch all the way. We poked at it and it rattled open. I made a joke. Max didn't laugh. He just said, "We're literally in the middle of nowhere. Who's coming out here?" We ate microwave popcorn, played Uno, and tried to talk over the echo of our voices in the empty rooms. By 10:45 p.m., the silence had grown thick. The house creaked like it was breathing. Every gust of wind rattled the panes and made the lights flicker. That's when Max said something I will never forget. This place was empty for 7 years. The old man who lived here, Mr. Desmond, he disappeared. Left everything behind, dinner on the table, tools in the shed. They never found him. I didn't know whether to be creeped out or annoyed. "Why'd you wait till now to tell me?" He shrugged. "I thought you'd want to know whose room we're sleeping in." My charm wore thin, but suddenly every sound made me jump. That night I learned how fast your brain can go from bored to terrified. So we shut off the lamps, crawled into our sleeping bags, and tried to sleep with 2 flashlights in hands. The first dozen creaks meant nothing. The next 20 set my nerves rattling. I counted my breaths. I calculated time. I watched dust motes glow in the flashlight beam. I tried to pray, but the house stretched long and cold and empty around me. By 11:30, things escalated. The motion sensor light in the backyard clicked on. That old floodlight by the barn. Neither of us had walked near it. We peeked at the sliding glass door. The backyard looked empty, dark. Max whispered, "No raccoons out in March." I swallowed and agreed, but the air felt heavy. Then upstairs, hardwood floorboards creaked. Single, deliberate steps. Max froze. I forced calm. Maybe the house is settling. Lies spilled from my mouth. I couldn't convince myself. My pulse throbbed in my throat. We stayed downstairs. I nudged Max. "Let's at least check the fuse box." He shook his head. "Not yet." I said we should switch the living room lamp on, but there were no working switches. So we sat, torchlight in hand, chattering nervously, until midnight came and the footsteps sounded again, heavier this time, echoing across the upstairs hallway. Max clicked on his flashlight and said quietly, "Stay here." But I followed. I followed because my body felt like it would explode if I stayed. We crept up the stairs, each tread groaning beneath our weight. At the top, the hallway stretched beyond reach of the flashlight. Nothing lit, but we could hear our hearts. We checked rooms. Master bedroom, empty. Closet, dusty, abandoned. Then we glanced at the attic access door. It was open, just a crack. Though earlier we'd both shut it. Neither of us touched it. My flashlight trembled and Max's grip went slack. We exchanged a look and backed away without a word. We moved a couch in front of the back door as a barricade, for what it was worth. We tried to sleep again. Nothing happened for a long time. Then at 2:40 a.m. it did. The front door rattled. Softly, just one shake. I bolted upright. Max was already alert, staring at the entrance. Footsteps on the porch wood, slow and deliberate. Then, a knock. One loud, hell-echoed rap. Sharp. We didn't react. No breathing. The house felt smaller, suffocating. 5 minutes dragged. Silence. We exchanged eyes, mental whispers. Should we move? Call someone? Finally, I dialed 911 and whispered what I could. Miners alone at 10:19. Finch Hollow. Someone is outside. The operator told us to stay quiet and locked in place. The flashlight felt heavy. After nearly an hour, a deputy arrived. I peered out the window before opening the door. He seemed confident, but concerned. He found the front door unlocked, though we had both checked it. He checked windows. He told us muddy footprints circled the kitchen and drag marks curved into the shed. He said no forced entry, meaning the intruder had keys or unlocked something, or maybe used a window. He stayed to keep us safe until sunrise. When Max's parents returned that morning, they barely looked surprised. They seemed annoyed by our calls, said it was probably a prank. I didn't say anything. I just left with Max. We never spoke much after. School felt different that week. Max stopped inviting anyone over. I never asked why. I didn't want to hear excuses or lectures. I just accepted. He lived in a house no one else would. I hooked lunches around him, said hi in the halls, but sleepovers became off limits. I told my mom no one was allowed to drop me at a house I didn't know the layout, the locks, the history of. No exceptions. I started reading about the house afterward. A local news blog mentioned a man who vanished from Finch Hollow in 2014, tools intact in his shed, dinner uneaten. They called it a local mystery. No body, no suspects, no closure. That detail swallowed me. I realized how ignorant I'd been, how I'd laughed about padlocks and no Wi-Fi, how I'd brushed off my instincts because I wanted to be easygoing. But instincts are like warning lights. You don't wait till the engine stalls. Max transferred to a school closer to town soon after. I never visited his new house. We stayed friends in text, but sleepovers were off the table. Every time his weekend messages came, I felt the weight of our night sliding through me again. I couldn't let it happen twice. Every home I've stayed in since, whether a friend's or a relative's, I've asked 2 questions before I walk in. Does it have locks on the back and front doors? And who lived there before? Because now I know. Sometimes what feels safe, silent rooms, friendly faces, power outages, can mean nothing. You either carry your instincts with you or get lost in someone else's house. I keep Max's old flashlights. One of them clicks half on even when you barely touch it. I keep them on a shelf now. Sometimes I test the beam. It reaches shadows I don't want to face again. That night in Finch Hollow changed me. It taught me that danger doesn't always burst in with a mask or a scream. Sometimes it sneaks in on silent heels, unlocked doors, forgotten histories. Trust your instincts more than your assumptions. If something feels off, even tiny, almost insignificant, walk away. Home isn't just walls and a roof. It's locks that work, histories you understand, doors that feel secure. If those aren't in place, you're not staying. Growing up in Larchfield, Ohio, meant living inside a kind of invisible snow globe. Nothing ever really happened. The houses all looked the same. Parents knew each other from PTA meetings, and most of us had gone to school together since kindergarten. So when someone new showed up, it was like a rock dropped into a still pond. Ben Langley arrived 2 months into 6th grade. He didn't smile much, didn't talk unless spoken to, and carried around this battered skateboard with chipped black and white skull stickers on the underside. He had this shaggy black hair and always wore the same gray hoodie with the sleeves half chewed. No one knew where he came from. The rumors started before he said a word. Some kids said he got kicked out of his old school for fighting. Others said his parents were criminals. Ben never confirmed or denied anything. That made him interesting. Dangerous in a way we didn't yet understand. And when he invited half our class to a sleepover, everyone said yes. No one wanted to be left out of whatever mystery he was hiding. The sleepover was scheduled for Saturday, November 9th, 2014. I remember the date because I still have the text I sent my dad that night, one I wasn't supposed to send. Ben's house was on the edge of Harris Street, right near where the tree line started. It looked old, tired. The siding was gray, with rust stains under the windows, and there wasn't a single decoration outside. Not a pumpkin, not even a welcome mat. When my mom pulled up, she slowed the car, like she wasn't sure she had the right place. "You want me to walk you in?" "No," I said quickly. I was trying to act older than I was, even though something about the house made my stomach tighten. She watched me walk to the front door. I still remember the way her brake lights glowed red against the fallen leaves before she pulled away. Ben's mom answered the door. She wore a bathrobe over sweatpants and held a half-burned cigarette between 2 fingers. Her eyes were wide and glassy, like she'd just woken up, but her smile stretched too far. "Shoes off," she said without introducing herself. "Basement's that way." There were 6 of us in total. Me, Charlie, Jamal, Hunter, Kevin, and of course Ben. We all hesitated for half a second, then followed him down a narrow staircase into the basement. It smelled like damp wood and old blankets. The room was mostly empty except for a sagging couch, a floor lamp in the corner, and a TV sitting on a milk crate. Sleeping bags were already laid out across the cement floor. There were no snacks, no games, no music playing. Ben just dropped onto the couch and picked up the remote like this was all totally normal. We tried to shake off the weirdness, started talking about the usual things, video games, Halloween costumes, how boring Mrs. Danbury's math class was. But none of us were really comfortable. There was a kind of pressure in the air, like we were inside a balloon that might pop at any moment. "Where's your dad?" Kevin asked after a while. Ben's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Upstairs," he said. "Just don't bother him." The way he said it left no room for more questions, but something about it made the hair on my arms stand up. We didn't know then, not really, what was coming. But that was the moment, quiet and forgettable, when the night started changing. We tried to make the best of it. Around 9 p.m., Ben pulled out a dented metal box and dropped it in the middle of our circle like it was treasure. "You ever seen one of these?" he asked, flipping the latch. Inside were pocket knives, 3 of them, some loose firecrackers, and a photo. The knives looked real, not toys. One had a chipped bone handle and rust near the base of the blade. The firecrackers were the kind you'd get in a back alley on the 4th of July. But it was the photo that froze us. It was printed on glossy paper, faded and curling at the corners. It showed someone, man or woman, we couldn't tell, sitting in a chair, tied up with rope. Their face had been scribbled out with red ink, slashes of it. "Dude," Charlie said, "what is this?" Ben grinned. "Found it in the crawl space." "It's fake," Jamal said quickly. "Probably from a movie." Ben stared at him, not smiling. "You think I made it?" No one answered. I think we all wanted to pretend it didn't matter. Just another weird thing. A joke. But something about the way Ben looked at Jamal made the air shift. "You guys want to see it?" Ben asked. "What?" "The crawl space, where I found it." None of us wanted to, but we followed anyway. The door was under the stairs, a narrow wooden panel. Ben tugged it open, revealing a black space no taller than 3 feet. The smell hit us first: mildew, rot, and something sweet, almost syrupy, but wrong. "There's stuff back there," Ben said, crouching down. "My brother's old things." "You have a brother?" I asked, even though I hadn't seen any photos or heard anything about one. "Had," he replied. We didn't speak, just stared into the dark. "This feels like a crime show," Charlie said, half laughing. "Yeah," Ben said softly. "Except no one found anything." That line lodged itself somewhere in my brain. I still hear it sometimes. We backed out of the crawl space. The basement felt even colder now, and none of us could settle. We went back to the sleeping bags, but we didn't talk much after that. Around midnight, we heard it. A dragging noise upstairs. Heavy, slow. Then a door slammed. We all sat up, frozen. Ben didn't look scared. He just said, "Don't worry, he's just mad." "Your dad?" someone asked. Ben looked over at us and shook his head. Then came the footsteps. "No, my mom." The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Each one creaked above our heads, starting from the kitchen, then crossing over to the top of the basement stairs. None of us moved. Even Ben, who had been calm up until then, seemed smaller. His shoulders curled in. He didn't speak. The only sound was the hum of the floor lamp buzzing faintly in the corner. Then the basement door opened. We couldn't see who was there from where we were all huddled on the floor, but we heard the stairs groan as someone stepped down one at a time. A figure appeared. A man. He was shirtless, barefoot. His chest was pale and thin, almost sickly. His jeans hung low on his hips like he hadn't eaten in days. His face, I'll never forget it, looked hollowed out, like someone had scooped him from the inside. His eyes didn't blink. They stared past us, empty but fixed. He didn't say a word. He walked across the basement, moving slowly, like a sleepwalker. He passed right in front of the lamp, which cast a long, warped shadow against the cement wall. Then he sat down in the far corner of the room, cross-legged, and didn't move. We didn't know what to do. "Who is that?" Jamal whispered, barely audible. Ben rubbed his hands on his knees, not looking up. "Sometimes." "That's my uncle," he said. "He lives with us, but it didn't feel like a visiting uncle. It didn't feel like anyone should have been sitting in that corner at all." The man's breathing was loud now, heavy and wet. His head twitched every so often, just a small tick like he was trying to stay awake. Or maybe fight something inside him. "I want to go home," Kevin said under his breath. I did too, but nobody wanted to be the first to move, as if sudden movement might change the man's stillness, might snap something. Ben finally stood up and turned off the lamp. "He'll go back upstairs in a little while." "You sure?" I asked. He didn't answer. I waited another few minutes, then pulled out my phone and texted my dad under the sleeping bag. "Come get me. Not feeling good. Please. Now." The reply came fast. "On my way. Be outside in 10. I grabbed my jacket and stood. Ben didn't stop me. He didn't even look up. I walked upstairs without another word, ignoring the creaks, ignoring the feeling that eyes were following me. The living room was empty. His mom's cigarette sat on the ashtray, still burning. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold. When my dad pulled up, I bolted to the car and didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. The face of that man in the corner haunted me, not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do. He just sat there, still, watching, like he'd been waiting for something. The next Monday, Ben wasn't at school. Neither were Charlie or Kevin. I found out later they told their parents everything, at least the parts they could. And by Thursday, the rumors started. Child Protective Services had visited the Langley house. A neighbor said they saw an officer carrying something out wrapped in a black trash bag. Another said the basement window was cracked open and smeared with something dark. Ben didn't come back. Not that week, not ever. The school said he transferred, but no one knew where. 2 weeks later, I walked by 777 Harris Street with my mom while she was talking to a friend from her church group. The house was dark, the windows boarded, a yellow notice stapled to the door, the kind that meant the place had been marked for inspection or something worse. "Do you think it's true?" I asked my mom when her friend left. "That something bad happened there?" She gave me a look like she wanted to protect me, but I wasn't a kid anymore. "I don't know," she said, "but I'm glad you texted that night. I'm proud of you." I didn't feel proud. I felt watched. Like I'd walked out of something I still didn't fully understand. The real twist wasn't the man in the basement or the photograph or the crawl space. It was Ben. He had never once looked surprised, never scared. He knew the sounds upstairs, he knew the man's name. He had let us down there like it was normal, like it was part of the game. Looking back, I wonder if he invited us over for a reason. Maybe he wanted someone to see. Maybe he wanted help and didn't know how to ask, or maybe he didn't care anymore. That thought still keeps me up sometimes, especially when I remember what he said before we left the crawl space. No one found anything. Maybe no one ever did. Maybe no one ever looked hard enough. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the sidewalks before Thanksgiving, and Harris Street looked like something out of an abandoned painting. I avoided it. Even if my bike route passed close, I'd steer wide. The house was still boarded up, silent and lifeless, like whatever had been inside it had finally collapsed. I didn't talk to the other guys about it much. We tried once. Right before Christmas break, Charlie and I sat by each other in the cafeteria. He stirred his chocolate milk with a straw for 5 straight minutes before saying anything. "You ever think about that night?" he asked. "All the time." He nodded. "Ben, what if that was real? That photo? That guy tied up?" I keep thinking, what if it wasn't fake? What if I didn't answer? I couldn't. There were too many things that didn't add up. Like the way Ben never looked confused, or the photo with the scribbled out face, or how the crawl space smelled like it had a secret buried beneath the dirt and mildew. The man in the corner wasn't just off. He was ruined, as if whatever had happened in that house had drained him until only the body remained. Charlie took a bite of his sandwich and mumbled, "You think Ben knew what he was doing?" I didn't respond right away. Then I said the thing that had kept me up for nights since. I think Ben didn't know what else to do. That was the truth I'd been circling for weeks. Not everything is evil with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. Sometimes evil is quieter. Sometimes it's just the absence of someone stepping in. The absence of help, of protection. I think Ben grew up in that absence. Maybe the photo was real. Maybe it was a threat, or a memory, or a cry for help. Maybe the man in the corner had once been his father, or uncle, or brother. Maybe whoever tied that person up had also left the rest of the house in knots no one wanted to untangle. Whatever the story was, we were too young to understand it, and definitely too young to be living inside it for a night. Ben never came back. Not to school, not to town, not even as a name mentioned out loud. It was like the grown-ups decided if they didn't talk about it, it would disappear. But kids remember. Especially the ones who had to look at something terrible and pretend it was normal. Especially the ones who saw someone sitting in a dark corner, too broken to stand. And worst of all, I think Ben was used to it. Used to the silence. Used to no one knocking on that crawl space wall or asking the hard questions. Sometimes when I wake up at night and everything's too quiet, I wonder how many other houses sit just like that one, unlit, ignored, hiding things under the stairs. And I wonder if there's another Ben out there, waiting for someone to notice before it's too late. Not every monster lives in the woods. Some live in houses just down the street. And sometimes the scariest thing isn't the monster at all. It's how long it takes someone to believe the kid's trying to tell you it's there. The world doesn't change just because we look away. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Speak up, leave, ask questions. Trust your fear when it shows up early. It might just save your life or someone else's. Before that night, I didn't really know Shane that well. We weren't close friends, just ended up paired for a history project because our last names started with the same letter. He wasn't weird or anything, just one of those kids who kind of hovered on the edge of friend groups. We'd worked on the project at his place a couple times, and he seemed cool. Normal. Quiet, but not in a bad way. So when he invited me over for a sleepover, I figured why not? It beat being at home. My house had been full of tension for weeks. My parents were fighting a lot. Real quiet, careful fights they thought I couldn't hear, but I could. They never yelled, but that only made it worse. The silence between them was sharp. I needed to get out of there even for a night. So I packed a duffel and had my older brother drop me at Shane's around 7. His neighborhood was just outside Fox Hollow, one of those weird developments that got halfway finished before the money dried up. You know the kind. Half the street is lived in, the other half looks like a ghost town. Unfinished lots, empty cul-de-sacs, and woods pressing close on every side. Shane's house sat at the edge of it all, last one before the tree line swallowed the pavement. When I stepped inside, it felt pretty normal. His parents had just left, judging by the still warm takeout on the kitchen table. Lights were on. The house smelled like reheated pizza and pine-scented floor cleaner. For the first few hours, it was exactly what I needed. Just two guys zoning out on video games, inhaling junk food and joking around like we'd been friends forever. Then, around 11, Shane started acting off. Subtle stuff. Checking the window locks, glancing toward the front door a little too often. He got real quiet. When I asked him what was up, he gave this half shrug like he didn't want to say but couldn't help himself. "I thought I saw someone out by the garage last week," he said. It was like 2 a.m. Could have been a stray dog or something, but it freaked me out. That gave me a chill I tried to ignore. The streets around here were quiet, like too quiet. No streetlights past his driveway, no sounds except the wind in the trees, and no cell service, which I hadn't noticed until then. I didn't press him on it. I just nodded, like I understood. We went back to playing games, but the easy energy from earlier was gone. Something had shifted. Even his dog, Baxter, a skittish little beagle mix, kept pacing and whining, ears twitching every time he looked at the front window. We told ourselves it was raccoons. Probably just raccoons. At 12:30, we moved our sleeping bags into the living room. The plan was to stay up late watching movies. But that didn't happen, because right after we turned off the overhead lights and settled in, we heard it. A soft, steady tapping on the window. Not pounding, not scratching. Just a quiet, almost polite knock. 3 times, then silence. We sat there, frozen. The movie paused mid-scene, the glow of the TV casting long shadows behind us. And for the first time that night, I felt like maybe Shane had been telling the truth. "It's the wind," Shane whispered, though his voice cracked halfway through. We waited. Another tap. Same pattern. Soft. Deliberate. Like whoever, or whatever, was outside knew we were listening. We crawled slowly across the carpet toward the window. Baxter growled low in his throat, then bolted behind the couch. I remember thinking if the dog's scared, we probably should be too. Shane hesitated with his fingers on the edge of the curtain. Then he lifted it just an inch. I heard his breath catch. He leaned back fast and grabbed my arm. "Don't talk, don't move." "What did you see?" I whispered. He didn't answer. I peeked. Just for a second, there was a man standing outside. Not right at the window, but close enough. What froze me wasn't that he was there, but how he was standing. He wasn't looking in. He was turned away from us. Just standing with his back to the window, staring toward the woods. Not moving, like he was waiting for something behind him, or pretending he didn't know we were there. We dropped back onto the floor, crawling backward like kids in a horror movie. The carpet burned my knees through my jeans, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be anywhere but there. When we looked again, he was gone. Shane looked pale, his voice barely audible. He was here last week. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't think. That's when we heard a dull thud from the back of the house. The sliding door. We jumped up and ran to it. Nothing. Just darkness and the outline of trees swaying. But we knew someone had been there. You don't imagine a knock like that. You don't imagine a man standing just outside your window. We checked all the doors again, closed the blinds, turned off every light. We sat in silence for what felt like an hour, listening to every creak and shift of the house like it might suddenly speak. At 1:30 a.m. we heard footsteps on gravel, then a voice. Calm. Too calm. Jake? I turned to Shane. He shook his head. That's not your name, right? No, I whispered. Not even close. Jake? The voice called again. I saw the light, thought I'd stop by. It wasn't angry, it wasn't panicked. It was friendly, which somehow made it worse. We didn't respond. We barely breathed. The voice drifted around the side of the house. We heard crunching gravel, slow and steady. Then silence. It felt like we waited an hour before either of us moved again. It was probably 15 minutes, but time doesn't move right when you're scared. Shane leaned over and whispered, "No landline. Cell bars are dead." I checked my phone, 1 bar, then none. We couldn't call anyone, couldn't text, and there was no way I was going outside to try. Baxter was curled up under the coffee table, shaking like a leaf. We made a plan, if you can call it that. Grab the bat from the hall closet, hide in the laundry room and wait until morning. That room had one window, high and small, too small for anyone to fit through. We crept through the house like we were walking on glass. That's when we saw him again, standing at the back door. This time, he was facing us. Hoodie up, face in shadow, hands in his pockets like he was browsing a store display instead of stalking 2 kids. He didn't knock, he didn't move. He just stared through the glass and I swear I could feel his eyes even though I couldn't see them. We bolted, slammed the laundry room door shut and pushed the dryer in front of it. Not that it would help much. Inside that small space, the air was hot and shallow. Every creak from the house made us flinch. Every tick of the pipe sounded like footsteps. "I'm sorry," Shane whispered. "I didn't think he'd come back." "Who is he?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. I believed him. Because I think if Shane had known, he never would have invited me in the first place. The hours between 2 and 4 a.m. felt like some kind of slow-motion nightmare. Every few minutes we'd hear a noise, a floorboard pop, a gust against the siding, the distant groan of a branch bending in the wind, and our hearts would jump like it was him again. We stayed in that laundry room, crouched behind the dryer with the aluminum bat between us and the door. I had a flashlight clutched in one hand, and Shane was holding a dull utility knife he'd found in a drawer. Not much of a defense, but it felt better than nothing. At one point we heard footsteps again, closed this time, right outside the door. Then a slow dragging sound like someone running their fingers along the wall. We held our breath. My palms were sweating so much the flashlight almost slipped out of my grip. Then it stopped. Nothing for 10 minutes. 20. Shane whispered, "You think he's gone?" "I don't know," I said. "I don't even know if he was real." He didn't respond. And honestly, I couldn't blame him, because when you're that scared, the world bends. Reality starts to feel optional. Maybe it was all in our heads. Maybe it was a shared panic dream. But that didn't explain the dog, or the knocking, or the voice calling a name that didn't belong to either of us, or the man at the window, staring through the glass like he'd already seen us once before. Around 4:10 a.m., headlights swept across the living room wall. We froze. Then we heard car doors. Voices. Shane bolted out of the laundry room and pulled open the front door before I could stop him. It was his parents. His mom looked exhausted. His dad was carrying grocery bags and grumbling about the store being closed. Apparently, their overnight trip had gotten cut short due to some family emergency they hadn't told Shane about. We tried to explain what happened. Quick, panicked, overlapping sentences. I was practically shouting by the time I said, "He was right there, staring at us." His dad just sighed. "Around in the woods. Probably a lost hiker. Happens out here sometimes." People get turned. I could tell from Shane's face that he'd heard that one before. His mom gave him a long look, like she wasn't totally buying the story but didn't want to make a scene in front of me. "We'll check the cameras," she said. But the next day, Shane told me they didn't have any. That night was never mentioned again. Not in school, not by Shane. We stopped talking altogether, really. Not because we were mad, just because some experiences changed the temperature of a friendship. We were never going to go back to joking about video games and homework after what we saw, after what followed us through that night. 3 days later, Shane texted me. Just a picture. A piece of paper, folded once, stuck under the edge of their back deck. It said, "Didn't mean to scare you. Thought you were someone else. See you around." That was it. No name, no return address. Just that. I asked him if he told his parents. He said no. They'll just say it was a prank. But neither of us really believed that. The handwriting was strange. Neat, but too neat. Like someone trying too hard to appear calm. The letters were spaced just a little too evenly, like someone copying from memory. It didn't feel like a prank. It felt like a message, and not the kind you ignore. For weeks I couldn't sleep with the blinds open. I kept checking the backyard at night, even though I live miles away. My phone stayed on, fully charged, beside my pillow every night, even though the bars in that neighborhood would have been useless anyway. I didn't tell my parents. What would I even say? Hey, a stranger stalked us in the middle of the night and may or may not have been looking for someone named Jake. It didn't sound real, but it was. I don't think the man at the window meant to hurt us. If he had, he probably would have tried harder to get in. Maybe he was confused. Maybe he was unstable. Maybe he really was looking for someone else. But the scariest part? What if he wasn't? What if he was looking for someone named Jake, but just didn't care whether he found the right one or not? There are people out there who don't need a reason. They just need an opportunity. The world doesn't always shout when it's about to turn dark. Sometimes it taps softly on the window. Sometimes danger doesn't break the door down. It stands outside and waits for you to open it. So trust the voice in your gut when something feels wrong. Lock the doors. Pull the blinds. Listen to the dog. Fear isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the reason you survive. Moving in the middle of October wasn't the worst part. It was the timing. Senior year. 3 weeks before Halloween. My parents barely gave me time to pack. One day we were in our old place in suburban New Jersey. The next, I was standing in an empty bedroom with chipped walls and a cold draft snaking through the floorboards of 118 Hollow Birch Lane. Sandbrook, Maine, was the kind of town where people still waved when they drove past, and the grocery clerk knew your name after 2 visits. Our house, though, it stood at the far edge of a pine-lined road with no sidewalk, no mailbox, and woods thick enough that light disappeared after 6 p.m. My parents both work in medical sales, and thanks to overlapping conferences and out-of-state meetings, they were gone almost as often as they were home. So I had the place mostly to myself. I thought I'd like that. At first I did, but silence can stretch in weird ways. By the second week, the house started feeling less like a home and more like a container. I'd wake up with that pressure in my ears, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to move. Then I met Rachel. She was the only person at Sandbrook High who went out of her way to say hi. We were paired for a chemistry project and spent a few afternoons working at her place. Her house was warm, not just temperature-wise, but lived in. Her mom always had music playing, like soft jazz or something instrumental. One Friday, Rachel asked if I wanted to sleep over. My mom's cool with it. She's going to bed early, so it'll be just us. No rules, no curfews. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. Rachel's house was only 5 minutes from mine, but it felt like a different world. cozy, full of throw blankets and soft lighting. String lights wrapped around the porch. Inside smelled like cinnamon and cookies. Her mom greeted me politely, though a little distantly, before heading upstairs around 10. Rachel and I took the pizza to the basement den and queued up a horror movie neither of us had seen before. It wasn't that scary, more jump scares than anything, but I couldn't stop watching the basement window behind the couch. It was a small square pane, almost at ground level, just big enough to let in some moonlight through the grass. At one point during the movie, I could have sworn I saw movement, just a shape, like someone walking past. I told Rachel, but she waved it off. Around out there. "Neighborhood cats," she said. "They're always crawling, but something about the air shifted." The heater clicked off, and then I noticed a low hum in the vents. Not mechanical, more like breath. A slow vibration I could feel in my ribs. I brushed it off. It was around midnight when I went to brush my teeth in the downstairs bathroom. I noticed the window there, small, with fogged-up glass and a hairline crack in the bottom right corner. It was chilly, so I touched the frame. The latch was broken. When I mentioned it to Rachel, she went still. "We don't have a window in that bathroom." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. When we went back, there was no window, just a solid painted wall where I swore it had been. Rachel looked at me sideways. "Are you messing with me?" "No," I said, but I was starting to feel like the house was. We tried to forget it. Settled in for the night in sleeping bags on the den floor. At 1:08 a.m., I remember the time exactly, the house alarm beeped. Just once. A single low electronic tone. Rachel sat bolt upright. "That's not supposed to happen unless it resets." She grabbed the controller and checked the panel. "Zone 3, back door," it read. I blinked. "You guys have a back door?" Rachel shook her head. "Just the front and the basement." We crept up the stairs. The hallway was dark, no creaks, no footsteps. The panel was still blinking. Rachel knocked on her mom's door softly. No answer. When she opened it, the bed was made. Empty. Nothing out of place. No sign she'd even been there. "Maybe she went to the kitchen," I whispered. But the kitchen was empty too. We stood there for a long time, not knowing what to do. Every noise felt magnified, the house groaning with age or something else. Finally, we went back to the basement, locked the door, and crawled under the blanket. That was when the sound started above us. A slow creak, like weight shifting on an old board. Then another, closer. I didn't breathe. Rachel grabbed my hand. Her nails were digging into my skin. The creaking paused. We didn't dare move until dawn. Light through the basement window, real light, finally gave us the courage to come out. Rachel was pale, but calm. She called out for her mom again. This time Mrs. Kim was in the kitchen, calm, fully dressed, drinking tea. "I felt dizzy last night," she said. "I slept in the guest room." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. The alarm went off. Her mom frowned. I turned it off before going to bed. Neither of us believed that, but we let it drop. Later that day, while Rachel was doing laundry, I helped her move an old shelf away from the wall. Behind it, we found the panel, a square outline in the concrete. When we pried it open, there was a door. Metal, old, and bolted shut, with 2 rusted locks. Faint writing was scratched into the surface, barely visible in the dust and shadows. "This place remembers." Rachel said her mom never mentioned a second door. It wasn't in the floor plan. She checked the old realtor documents. There was no record of a room behind that wall. I never stayed over again. A week later, I moved back into my cold, silent home at 118 Hollow Birch Lane. Funny how that house, so empty, so strange, now felt safer. I kept my windows locked. I slept with a lamp on. I avoided the woods. Rachel and I still talked, but we never really brought up that night again. Sometimes you don't need to. You both feel the same thing but can't find the words for it. I asked once gently if she ever brought up the door to her mom. She shook her head. She wouldn't believe me, or she already knows. That thought stayed with me. Still does. It's not the noise that gets you in places like that. It's the quiet. It's the feeling that something beneath the floorboards remembers and is waiting for you to forget. But I won't. I can't. Trust your instincts, especially when something doesn't feel right. Not all houses are haunted by ghosts. Some are haunted by what people refuse to see. The most dangerous things aren't always hiding in the shadows. Sometimes they're sealed behind doors that no one wants to admit are there. I'd never been to Asheville before. After Mom's surgery, I hadn't spent a weekend away from home, and truthfully, part of me didn't want to. But when Kara invited me out for an overnight hang at her house, I decided I needed the break. Her parents had a guest house in their big yard. Just us girls, she said. No parents, no drama. Everything felt light until I stepped off the plane and onto the gravel driveway of her family's home. Their property was tucked into a deep pocket of western North Carolina woods just beyond the city lights, where the air smelled like pine and distant rain. The main house loomed large and polished. The guest house was a cozy wooden cabin set back among tall oak trees. Fairy lights were strung across the patio, giving it that warm Airbnb vibe, and the woods behind it looked thick and still, inviting and just a little unsettling in the dusk. Kara's parents stayed in the main house, and for the three of us, Kara, her cousin Jenna, and me, it felt like a secret camp. Kara's confident energy filled the guest house right away. Inside, there were 2 small bedrooms, a kitchenette, and big windows facing the woods. We unpacked blankets, set up sleeping bags on the living room floor, microwaved s'mores, and started watching campy horror movies. I felt unexpectedly safe, even happy. This was what respite felt like, sunlit identity aside. Jenna arrived later that evening, her Midwestern accent still humming with vacation excitement. She told us stories about visiting Blue Ridge Parkway and sampling Appalachian syrup. By 9:30 p.m., we were inside watching Camp Slasher 2 and giggling over the jump scares. Kara's dog snoozed under the coffee table, mouth slightly open. I stretched, looking out the window toward the woods. The trees swayed slightly in the moonlight. My phone buzzed. Kara's mom. "Did you girls leave the patio lights on? They keep turning back on." Kara frowned and texted back. "We didn't touch them. It's probably a wiring glitch." The lights flickered overhead in response. Kara shrugged. "That switch always glitches." But the air had gone still. Heavy. I couldn't shake this sense that something was watching. I looked at Jenna's face. She was still laughing, but her eyes were suddenly serious. At around 10:45, after Kara's mom said goodnight upstairs, the guest house door creaked. Gently, not slammed. It swung open. We froze. Kara hopped up and locked it again, brushing it off as wind or an uneven hinge. "It's fine," she muttered. "Old wood. It settles." But the forest outside was silent. There was no breeze. The feeling in the room shifted. I sat with my knees pulled up, watching the sliding glass window behind the couch. Jenna changed the disc in the DVD player. She tried to joke it off, but her tone cracked halfway through and faded quickly. Kara reached to lock the door again. The click echoed. At midnight, the power flickered twice. The ceiling fan groaned and then stopped. Every light went out. The only glow came from our phones, but both of us had 0 bars. The Wi-Fi vanished simultaneously. Jenna let out a shaky laugh, but the sound didn't land. Then the thermostat in the hallway rebooted. A pale message blinked across the screen. "System error, code 9. Kara's bright confidence flickered. She checked it again. Same error. We weren't cold, but the air felt dense, almost warm in hush. Jenna joked about ghosts, but we heard it next. Footsteps, slow and measured on the gravel outside. We froze like canned soup. No one moved. Kara tried to peek through the curtain, lifting it an inch. Gravel, maybe moonlit stone, No one visible. Then came a tap against the window. Light, deliberate. Not enough to break glass, just a soft talk-talk. Kara's eyes went wide. There. That's the back window, behind the garden wall. No path leads, I realized at that moment. The design of the guest house had no motion sensor light on that side. But the lights flickered on for an instant. We didn't speak. We turned every light off and crawled behind the kitchen counter, curling close. The flashlight lay forgotten on the counter. Quiet stretched between our breathing. Another sound, the guest house door, unlocking. We had locked it. It stayed still for seconds that felt like hours. A narrow shadow passed across the small glass inlet in the door. So slow. Kara's suitcase trembled behind us. Fingers gripped hands that were shaking. Then silence. Kara dialed her mom using Wi-Fi calling. The call rang once, twice. Finally answered. "Kara?" The voice said, groggy. "You're calling from the guest house phone? That line was disconnected months ago." Kara whispered. "No, Mom. I'm on my cell. We're still inside." There was a pause, then her mom's voice lowered. "Then who just walked out of there?" The words knocked me inside. We screamed and threw furniture against the door, chair, suitcase, even the kitchen stool. We heard footsteps pacing outside. Lights stayed off. The night stretched. We didn't sleep. We just listened. The faint hum of the thermostat, the floor settling. The girl cousins we tried to be before now lost somewhere we never wanted to go. Time stretched in a way I hadn't felt since waiting outside the hospital room the night of Mom's surgery. Kara's flashlight, flickering on low battery, was the only source of light in the guest house. Jenna was crouched under the counter, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. None of us spoke unless absolutely necessary. Outside, the footsteps had stopped. We hoped that meant whoever, or whatever, was gone. But the silence made everything worse. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. No crickets, no wind, just pressure. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. Kara's showed the same. Jenna had turned hers off to conserve power, but the second she turned it back on, something strange happened. The screen blinked and went white, then rebooted with the Apple logo like it had been factory reset. "What the hell?" she whispered. We heard a soft thud behind the wall, not the exterior wall, an inside one. It came from the small bedroom by the kitchen. We'd barely gone in there, just dropped our bags on the bed and moved on. The thud repeated. Then something scraped. I stood slowly. "I need to check." Kara grabbed my wrist. "Don't." But I already knew I'd be thinking about this for the rest of my life if I didn't. I walked down the narrow hall, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam caught part of the guest house blueprint taped near the breaker box. I noticed something I hadn't before. The small bedroom wasn't supposed to have a closet, but we'd seen one. The handle to that closet was slightly open. I stopped in the doorway, shining my light across the room. The closet door creaked. I swear it moved an inch on its own. My breath hitched. I didn't get closer. I couldn't. I backed out, returned to the girls, and shut the bedroom door behind me. "I think someone's been staying in here," I whispered. Jenna blinked. Like, squatting or hiding. Before we could process that, the guest house phone rang. Not anyone's cell. The landline we didn't know existed until that night. The ancient wall-mounted phone near the kitchenette lit up and gave off a faint ring. It didn't even sound fully functional. It was like hearing a ghost remember how to make a noise. We stared at it. Ring. "Don't pick it up," Kara whispered. But I couldn't help it. I reached out and lifted the receiver, hand shaking. Silence. Then a click. Then a voice, hollow and thin, as though spoken from beneath a floorboard. "You're not supposed to be in here." I slammed the receiver down. We stayed awake, all three of us. None of us said much after that. Every creak of the walls made us flinch. Every second felt like the last before something happened. Around 3:30 in the morning, the sky outside the guest house finally started shifting. Not bright yet, but the dark was breaking. That's when the pacing started again. Soft footsteps circled the guest house. Once, twice, then stopped outside the bedroom wall. I wanted to believe it was just wildlife, maybe a coyote, a deer, something natural and explainable. But I knew better. The thermostat blinked again. System error, code 9. The lights tried to come on and failed. Then the lock on the front door clicked again. We had jammed it shut with furniture. We hadn't touched it. Still, it moved. I had enough. I pulled open the drawer under the kitchenette and grabbed a heavy ceramic bowl, the closest thing I had to a weapon. Kara hissed, "What are you doing?" "Standing here is doing nothing." I stepped toward the door, bowl in hand, when something slid under it. A folded piece of paper. I froze. I bent slowly, picked it up, and opened it. The handwriting was crooked, faint. It read, "You shouldn't stay in places that forget they're empty." I dropped it like it burned. Behind me, Jenna let out a soft sob. I looked at Kara. Her face was pale. She was trying not to cry. The door didn't move again. At 6:08 a.m., we heard the sound of Mr. Blake's footsteps crunching through the gravel. He knocked 3 times, heavy and solid. Kara peeked through the curtain and nearly collapsed with relief. Her dad stepped inside like nothing had happened. He looked around. "You girls stayed up all night?" No words, just nods. He checked the guest house, room by room. Nothing missing, nothing broken. But when he got to the bedroom, he paused. Then he reached up and pulled on something above the closet door. A string, a hidden attic hatch. "I didn't know this had an attic," he muttered. We didn't ask what he saw when he peeked inside. He came back down fast and said, "Let's go to the main house, now." Girls, we followed without a word. Later that afternoon, while helping clean up, I found the guest house landline in a drawer. Still no dial tone, but its caller ID showed one outgoing call, 11:47 p.m., no number, just the label, unknown XT. We didn't go back into the guest house for the rest of that weekend, not once. Kara's dad didn't push us to explain what happened, but I could tell he knew something was wrong. He didn't ask about the phone call or the attic. He just made pancakes, kept the TV on in the background, and checked the locks more than usual. Sunday morning, I almost asked if they were going to report anything. But how do you report something you can't name? That afternoon, while Kara and Jenna napped on the couch, I stood on the porch staring out toward the guest house. The daylight made it look normal again. Quiet, empty, like nothing had ever happened. But I knew it had. The door frame still had the deep scratch across the wood, sharper and more deliberate than any weather damage. The patio lights flickered once more, even though Kara's dad had shut off the circuit entirely that morning. Before I left to go home, Mr. Blake pulled me aside near the garage. His voice was soft, measured. "I checked the attic," he said. There were blankets, a small lamp, empty food wrappers. Looked like someone had been living up there, maybe for weeks. I couldn't speak. My stomach turned. "We're going to file a police report," he added. "Anything else happens, you let us know, immediately." But I'm guessing the guy's long gone. Still, if I nodded, "Thank you." He hesitated. Photo. There was something else in the attic, taped to the underside of a beam. My voice came out hoarse. "Of what?" He didn't answer directly, just said, "We took it down. Burned it. You don't need to know." I didn't push further. On the drive home, the sunlight felt too bright, too sharp, like everything real had become too exposed. I stared out the window as the trees blurred past, thinking about how quickly safety can dissolve, and how thin the walls are between the world we know and the parts of it we don't want to see. 2 weeks later, Kara texted me that the guest house was being renovated. She didn't say whether it was her parents' idea or if something else happened. Either way, she was staying in the main house now. No more sleepovers, no more guest house keys. As for me, I stopped thinking of sleepovers as light, forgettable things. There's something unsettling about sleeping somewhere unfamiliar, no matter how cozy it seems. A stranger's window, a borrowed bed. It only takes one moment for everything to shift. I never saw whatever, or whoever, walked through that guest house that night. But I saw the effect it had. On Kara, on Jenna, on myself. It's strange how fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it knocks once and leaves a note. And if you're lucky, you get to wake up and go home. Always pay attention to the spaces we overlook. The most dangerous things often don't live in haunted houses or ghost stories. They live in quiet corners, unlocked doors, and assumptions of safety. Whether it's a forgotten attic, a disconnected phone line, or a guest house no one checks, what we ignore can become what we fear. Trust your instincts. Speak up when something feels wrong, even if it doesn't look wrong. And never let comfort blind you to the truth that some places were never meant to be lived in, and some people never truly leave. When I think about that spring, it always feels colder than it actually was. Maybe it's because of the fog, or maybe it's because that was the season I realized not all silence is peaceful. Sometimes it's the loudest warning you'll ever hear. After my parents split, my mom did what a lot of moms do. She packed up our lives into the back of a Honda and drove us out of San Diego like we were fleeing a war. We landed in a little town called Eatonville, Washington. She said we needed a fresh start, a phrase I've grown to hate. Eatonville was all towering fir trees, wood smoke, gravel roads, and the kind of quiet that could smother you if you let it. It was nothing like home, and at 16, I didn't want new. I wanted normal. I wanted my old life back. The house we moved into was small and cold. Mom worked long shifts at the health clinic, and I was left with boxes we never really unpacked and the constant static of unfamiliarity. School wasn't better. It felt like everyone had known each other since birth, and I was the awkward transplant they didn't know what to do with. I ate lunch alone for the first few weeks, sat in the back of class, and tried not to make eye contact. Then I met Hazel. She was quiet, but not in a sad way. More like she was living just slightly out of phase with the rest of the world. She wore oversized sweaters even when it wasn't cold, carried a leather-bound notebook everywhere, and always smelled faintly of cedar. The first time she spoke to me was after English class. I had just made some dumb comment about Poe's The Raven being edgy for the 1800s. She laughed, not politely but genuinely, and said, "Should read The Fall of the House of Usher. Way darker. Way better." We talked more after that, at first about books, then music, then life. Hazel wasn't like the other kids. She never gossiped, never tried to impress anyone. She had this old soul thing about her that made me feel steadier when we hung out. So when she invited me to a sleepover at her uncle's farmhouse just outside of town, I said yes without thinking too hard. Birch Mill Farm was about 15 minutes outside Eatonville, tucked behind a winding gravel road and an open field covered in mist. It didn't look creepy at first, just old, like it belonged to another time and was doing its best to tolerate this one. A red barn leaned to one side like it had a bad knee. The two-story farmhouse had a sagging porch, yellowing windows, and white paint that peeled like sunburnt skin. When we pulled up, Hazel's uncle came out to meet us. Uncle Leon. Tall, stooped, and silent. He had a faded trucker cap pulled low and hands that looked like they'd been building things since the Great Depression. He didn't say a word, just nodded at me, then walked back inside and up the stairs. Hazel said, "He's not big on talking. Don't take it personally." The inside of the house was old but clean. Wood floors, thick curtains, no television. The kind of place where you could hear every footstep and every creak in the boards, like the house was constantly reminding you it was alive. The parlor room had a fireplace, a record player, and a bookshelf full of dusty hardbacks with spines worn from love or time. I couldn't tell which. That night started off normal. We baked cookies in a tiny kitchen with old copper pans and an oven that wheezed every time we opened it. Hazel played Billie Holiday on the record player, and we ate while wrapped in quilts near the fire. I told her about San Diego. She told me about growing up on the farm. Her parents were gone. She lived with Leon because he was the only family left. I didn't ask more than that. Some silences are best left untouched. Around 9:30, she pulled out a scrapbook filled with old photos. All black and white, all serious faces, no smiles. "That's my great-grandmother," she said, pointing to a photo of a thin woman standing stiffly in front of the barn. "She died in the field out back, winter of '58. As she flipped the page, "That's my cousin Tommy, drowned in the well when he was 8. I let out a nervous laugh. "You know, most people show vacation photos at sleepovers." Hazel shrugged. "I guess my family took more funerals than vacations." It was a weird moment, but not scary. Not yet. At 10:30, the lights flickered. I looked out the window. The trees were still. Not even a breeze. Hazel said it happened sometimes, that the wiring was old. But something about it unsettled me, like the house had exhaled for the first time all night. We set up our sleeping bags in the living room. The fire had died down, and the only light came from a small lamp in the corner. Hazel fell asleep fast, curled up like a cat. I stayed awake listening to the sounds old houses make, floorboards popping, pipes groaning. I told myself it was nothing, just an unfamiliar house in a strange town. Then I heard the knock, not on the front door, on the bathroom window, a window that was at least 8 feet off the ground. And just like that, the quiet stopped feeling peaceful. It started feeling like a trap. I didn't move at first, just laid there listening. My brain kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't a knock. Maybe the house was settling. Maybe a branch hit the glass. But it wasn't the sound of a branch. It was deliberate, sharp. 3 short raps, like knuckles on glass. I sat up in my sleeping bag and glanced at Hazel. She was still out, face turned toward the fireplace. I waited for the knock to come again, but the house had gone completely still. Curiosity tugged at me. Against every bit of good judgment, I grabbed my phone, no service, of course, and padded softly to the bathroom. The hallway creaked under my feet, and the air felt colder, like something had seeped into the walls. The bathroom was small, old-fashioned, with a clawfoot tub and a medicine cabinet that didn't close all the way. I stood by the door, staring at the high window above the sink. It was too far up to see out of. I'd have to climb on the toilet just to get a glimpse. My heart was pounding in my ears. But there was nothing, just the wind outside. Except there was no wind. I went back to the living room, trying to act normal. Hazel stirred as I settled back into my bag. "You okay?" she asked sleepily. "Yeah," I lied. "Just had to pee." She turned on her side, pulling the blanket over her shoulder. "Just a branch. One of the trees scrapes the house when it's windy. If you hear knocking, it's probably," I nodded, even though it still wasn't windy. A little after midnight, the sound from upstairs started, loud, dragging thuds like someone stomping around wearing boots. Then came the unmistakable screech of something heavy scraping across the floor. I sat up instantly. Hazel, too. "Leon?" I whispered. She didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't think that's him." Her voice was flat, like she'd accepted it before she said it. And then the record player turned on by itself. No one had touched it since we were baking cookies. A scratchy jazz tune spilled into the room, soft at first, then louder, like someone had cranked the volume knob. I jumped up, ran over to it. The cord was hanging loose, not even plugged into the wall. I turned around just as Hazel stiffened. She whispered, "Did you hear that?" Then I did too, a voice, low and breathy, whispering my name from somewhere inside the house. "Nora." Just once. That's all it said. I stood frozen, heart thudding. "Hazel, what the hell is going on?" She didn't answer. Then she said something strange. "I need to show you something. We have to go upstairs." I stared at her. "That's where the noise came from." She nodded, pale. "Exactly." I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed to run in the opposite direction, but Hazel's face had shifted. Not fear. Resignation. Like whatever was upstairs, she'd already made peace with it. She grabbed a flashlight and led me up the narrow staircase. The steps groaned under our weight, louder than they should have. The air got colder with each step, and by the time we reached the top floor, my breath was visible. There were 3 doors, a bathroom, a small guest room, and the attic door at the end of the hallway. Hazel walked past the others without hesitation. She opened the attic door slowly. It let out a long, painful creak. We stepped inside, the flashlight beam jittering against the slanted wooden walls. The attic smelled like dust and old wood and something metallic underneath it all. Hazel walked to the far corner, behind a stack of broken furniture and boxes. She pulled back an old chest and lifted a loose floorboard beneath it. "Look," she said. Inside was a photograph. I picked it up with trembling hands. It was old, crumpled, water-stained. But I was in it, me, standing in front of the farmhouse. Same pajamas I had on now, same hair, same face. I nearly dropped it. "What the hell is this?" Hazel didn't answer right away. She just looked down. "You're not the first girl to stay here." The words hit like ice water. I looked at her, suddenly unsure of everything. Was this a prank? Was she lying? "How is this even possible?" I asked. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I found this a year ago, after someone else stayed. Her name was Maya. She was new too. She never came back to school." I stared at her, trying to breathe. "What happened to her?" Hazel shook her head. "They said she ran away, but this picture, she was wearing the same clothes she wore the night she slept here, and the way the photo was buried, it was like someone was trying to hide it." Then the attic door slammed shut behind us. We both jumped. I ran back to the door, yanked it open. Nothing there. No wind. No Leon. Just that same dead stillness. From downstairs, the record player started again. The music had changed. Now a song that sounded like an old gospel hymn, warped and slow, like a choir trying to sing through water. I turned to Hazel. "We have to get out of this house, now." She nodded, for the first time truly scared. We made it down the stairs, but halfway through the living room we both froze. The fireplace, which had gone cold hours ago, was lit again. Flames flickered, but there was no wood in it. Just burning, like something invisible was fueling it. On the wall above it, something new. Dozens of old photographs pinned in a grid. All different girls, different clothes, different years, but each one in the same place, Birch Mill Farm. Some smiling, some looking off camera, all of them taken right outside this house. I walked up to it slowly, feeling the weight of it in my chest. My hand trembled as I pointed. "One. That's Maya." That Hazel nodded silently. "And her, and her. Who are these people?" Hazel shook her head. "I don't know. I don't think they ever left." Then we both heard it again. The voice. Only this time it wasn't whispering. It was screaming. My name. Over and over. We grabbed our things and ran for the front door, only to find it locked. Not like locked from the inside. Locked. The key was gone. The bolt was jammed. Hazel's hand shook as she twisted the knob. It wasn't like this before. Then I saw movement. In the hallway mirror, a man standing just outside the frame, only visible in the reflection, tall, pale, his face featureless, like it had been erased. He raised one hand and knocked, 3 times, on the glass from the inside. I turned away from the mirror and saw nothing. The hallway was empty. But when I turned back, he was closer. Hazel pulled me away. "Come on, there's another exit through the cellar." We ran, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. She threw open the basement door, and we bolted down the steps. The air was colder than outside, and it smelled like wet earth and metal. At the far end was a rusted storm door, padlocked. Hazel tried the lock with shaking hands. There used to be a key down here. I searched frantically, on shelves, under crates, behind dusty jars filled with things I didn't want to look at. Then I found a tin box. Inside, a small brass key. It fit. We threw the doors open and stumbled out into the foggy night, gasping for air like we'd been underwater. We didn't stop running until we hit the gravel road. Hazel called her mom. Mine was working, so I stayed with Hazel that night, at a neighbor's house. We didn't sleep. The next day, we returned with the police. The photos in the attic were gone. The record player was shattered. No one could explain the locked doors or the knocking. Uncle Leon had disappeared. Hazel moved in with her aunt 2 weeks later. I stayed in Eatonville until school ended, then begged my mom to transfer me. She did. We never spoke of Birchmill again, but some nights, I still dream about the photo, the one of me, wearing pajamas I've never worn since, standing in front of that house, smiling at something just outside the frame. Not every invitation is innocent. Not every silence is safe. And sometimes the past isn't behind you. It's waiting for you to walk back in. Trust your instincts, especially when something feels off. Because the scariest ghosts aren't always dead. Sometimes they're people who never left. If I had to pick one moment when everything started to shift, it would be the first night I stepped into room 6B. But honestly, the unraveling began long before that. When my mom and I moved to Allentown, it wasn't for a fresh start or to be closer to family. It was because we had nowhere else to go. After Dad left and bills piled up, my mom took whatever apartment she could afford. Norwalk Apartments was the best she could find on short notice, but the building always felt like it was trying to fall apart quietly, like it didn't want to make a scene, just fade. We moved into Unit 6F. Cracked tiles, carpet that smelled faintly of mildew, and windows that fogged up even in July. I hated how quiet it was at night. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that made you feel like you were being watched even when no one was around. The only person my age I ever saw around was Madison Taylor, Mads. She lived 2 doors down in 6B and had this loud, confident energy that kind of overwhelmed me at first. The first time we talked, she offered me gum and rolled her eyes at the flickering hallway light. "This place is sketchy," she said, like it was a joke, but not really. "You'll get used to it, or go nuts." We weren't friends yet, but a few nights later, Mads knocked on my door holding a bag of popcorn and asked if I wanted to come over for a girls' night. I said yes, mostly because I didn't want to sit alone with my thoughts and another sad rewatch of old YouTube videos. Room 6B smelled like cinnamon gum and takeout wrappers. Her walls were covered in posters, horror movies, old bands, one of that weird goat man from The Witch. It was messy in a lived-in way, not dirty, just cluttered with energy. Mads was everything I wasn't. Loud, bold, unapologetic. By 10:30 we'd played Truth or Dare, watched 3 horror movies and eaten pizza rolls that were somehow both burnt and frozen. I started to feel okay again. Not great, but not hollow. Then something slammed in the hallway. Loud. Mads barely looked up. Something. Probably the guy from 6D. He's always arguing with ghosts but it didn't sound like yelling. It sounded like something dragging. Like weight being pulled across concrete, and it didn't stop right away. It dragged, paused, then dragged again. I glanced toward the door, feeling the first curl of dread settle into my chest. The hallway went quiet again, like someone had held their breath on the other side of the door. Mads shrugged it off. "Seriously, don't stress. This place is a dumpster. There's always weird noises." It didn't sit right with me, but I didn't want to be the freaked-out new girl, so I nodded and changed into pajamas. Mads rolled out an old mattress next to her bed and tossed me an extra blanket. It sagged in the middle, the kind of mattress that had been slept on by a dozen different people and never once cleaned. But I didn't complain. We turned off the lights. The apartment settled around us. Pipes ticked. A car honked in the distance. Somewhere a dog barked. Then I heard a door creak open. Not slam, not rattle. Creak. From inside the apartment, I sat up fast. "Did you leave the front door open?" "No," Mads said, her voice a little more serious now. "I think I locked it." I got up, heart racing. I crept into the narrow entryway. The deadbolt was turned, but the chain was dangling, loose. "It wasn't latched," I said. Mads came over and peered at it. "I swear I locked it." I opened my mouth to say something else when the lights cut out. Complete blackout. We both froze. No fan, no hallway light. Even her LED clock blinked off. "Power goes out sometimes," Mads whispered, but she sounded less sure than before. Then, in the dark, came a knock. Not at the front door, at the closet. Soft, measured. Like someone didn't want to wake anyone, just let us know they were there. We turned at the same time. The closet door stood just a few feet from the mattress, white, thin, and closed. Mostly. Now it was open just an inch. My voice cracked. "Do you keep anything in there?" "No," Mads said quickly. Moved in. "It's jammed, like stuck shut jammed. It's been like that since we..." But it wasn't stuck anymore. She reached for her phone and turned on the flashlight. We both crept toward the crack, slowly, step by step. My throat was dry. She shined the light through the opening. Nothing. Just coats, boxes, dust. But we both heard it. Breathing. Unsteady. Deep. Human. We backed away fast. Mads locked the closet door, even shoved a chair in front of it. We didn't talk much after that. Just curled up in our sleeping bags and stared at the ceiling. I pretended to sleep. But at 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in the kitchen. Light ones. Careful. I thought it was Mads. I turned my head to call out, but she was right beside me. Asleep. The footsteps stopped. Then, the microwave beeped. Once. Twice. Then came the sound of buttons being pressed. Beep. 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 I sat up terrified, every muscle tight. I crawled toward the hallway and peeked into the kitchen. It was empty. No one at the counter. No one near the microwave. But the timer was running. 2:22. And the microwave wasn't plugged in. I backed up, shaking, and that's when I saw them. Footprints, muddy, bare. They led from the kitchen toward the living room, toward the mattress I had been sleeping on. I woke Mads fast. She saw them and her whole expression dropped. "This isn't normal," she said quietly. "This isn't the guy from 6D. This is something else." We called 911 from my phone. They showed up 10 minutes later. Apartment was empty, except the closet. The chair had fallen over. Inside they found a small cloth bag. Inside the bag, Polaroids. Dozens of them, each one of a different girl. All of them sitting on the same mattress I had just slept on. We didn't talk while the officers flipped through the photos. There were too many to count. Some faded, others new. But all of them, girls, alone on that mattress. Different years, different faces, same background, same room. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no prints on the door. The lock worked fine. Power came back within the hour. No one could explain how the photos got there. Mads was shaken, but she tried to play it cool. I could tell she was faking it for my sake. Her mom showed up around 6 a.m., and after that, I went back to my apartment and didn't sleep for days. 6 weeks later, I found their door wide open, empty, like they'd left in the middle of packing. No forwarding address, just gone. Room 6B got relisted. I saw 3 different families move in over the summer. None stayed more than a week. One night, I passed by on my way to do laundry and noticed the door ajar again. I looked inside. That mattress was still there, sitting in the center of the room, waiting. Some places don't want to be lived in. They want to remember. Trust your instincts, especially when fear tells you something isn't right. The scariest part of a haunted place isn't the ghost. It's what, or who, keeps bringing them back.